Bones don't care about stories. They don't exaggerate. They don't soften what happened. They preserve pressure, force, and damage exactly as it occurred. And when it comes to ancient humans, some bones tell stories that are difficult to listen to, even tens of thousands of years later. Because long before cities, writing, or recorded history, humans were dying in ways so violent that the evidence is still visible today. Skulls crushed inward, teeth embedded in bone, limbs torn apart, injuries that healed just enough to prove the person survived the attack, only to die later from its consequences. These aren't myths, they aren't assumptions, they're deaths proven by fossils. And what makes them unsettling isn't just the brutality, it's how ordinary many of these deaths were. No heroism, no ceremony, just sudden violence in a world where humans were not yet in control. One of the most disturbing examples begins with a single skull. In a cave system in what is now China, paleontologists uncovered the remains of Homo erectus individuals dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Among them was a skull that immediately stood out. Large sections were missing. The bone wasn't fractured randomly, it was crushed. Closer examination revealed the cause. The damage matched the bite force and tooth spacing of a giant extinct hyena known as Pachycrocuta. This animal was far larger than modern hyenas, with jaws capable of pulverizing bone with ease. The skull hadn't been gnawed after death. The fractures showed fresh bone damage, meaning the bite occurred while the individual was still alive or very shortly after death. And this wasn't an isolated case. At the same site, more than half of the human remains showed similar damage. Limbs shattered, bones crushed open. In many cases, the damage was consistent with marrow extraction, suggesting the bodies were processed as food. Hyenas don't kill cleanly. They don't go for the throat. They bite whatever they can grab and begin eating immediately, which means these humans weren't just killed, they were eaten alive. For a long time, researchers believed these caves were early human dwellings, but the bones told a different story. The cave wasn't a home, it was a feeding site, and humans were the prey. While predators were a constant threat, some of the most brutal deaths ancient humans experienced came not from animals, but from nature itself. Around 110,000 years ago, on the island of Java, a group of Homo erectus individuals died together in a single event. Their remains were found clustered in one location, buried rapidly in sediment. There were no signs of disease, no weapon injuries, no evidence of prolonged illness. They didn't die slowly, they died at once. The surrounding geology points toward a catastrophic flood, possibly triggered by volcanic activity. Water surged through the landscape, sweeping bodies into a narrowing river channel where debris trapped them. Some may have drowned, others may have already been dead when the flood carried them there, but the result was the same. An entire local population wiped out in a moment. If these individuals represent the last known members of Homo erectus in the region, then this site captures something incredibly rare, a human extinction event preserved in bone. Not caused by war, not caused by predators, just the environment turning hostile without warning. And sometimes, death came not from water or animals, but from other humans. In multiple prehistoric sites across Europe and the Americas, ancient human skeletons have been found bearing unmistakable signs of violence inflicted by tools. Skulls fractured by blunt force, arrowheads embedded in bone, defensive wounds on forearms and hands. These injuries weren't accidents, they were deliberate. One particularly chilling case involves a human skull with a stone projectile point still lodged deep inside it. The angle of entry shows the blow came from behind or above. The individual never saw it coming. The bone around the wound shows no signs of healing. Death was immediate. Other skeletons tell a different story. Broken ribs that healed improperly, fractured limbs that fused back together at unnatural angles. These individuals survived violent encounters, only to carry the injuries for the rest of their lives. And survival didn't always mean recovery. In some cases, infections set in. Bone tissue shows signs of inflammation and decay. The injury weakened the individual, limiting mobility and making them vulnerable to starvation or predators. Violence didn't need to be fatal in the moment to be deadly. And then there are deaths that blur the line between violence and desperation. In the American Southwest, archaeologists uncovered evidence of cannibalism among ancient human groups. Not ritual burial, not symbolic behavior, consumption. Human bones were cracked open to extract marrow. Cut marks show flesh was deliberately removed. Skulls were broken in consistent patterns seen in animal butchery. This wasn't isolated. Dozens of sites show similar evidence. The leading explanation is collapse. Severe droughts destroyed food sources, communities fractured, survival became uncertain. When resources disappeared, social boundaries vanished with them, and the bones recorded the result. What makes these deaths especially unsettling is that they weren't random acts of cruelty. They were responses to extreme conditions, situations where survival came at the cost of humanity itself. Ancient humans didn't live in a world of safety. They lived in a world where predators, disasters, and other humans were constant threats. A single mistake, a single event, or a single confrontation could end everything. And the only reason we know about these deaths at all is because something went so catastrophically wrong that the moment was preserved. Most ancient humans died and vanished without a trace, but these didn't. Their bones remained, and they still speak.
Survival in the ancient world often depended on strength, awareness, and luck. But even those weren't always enough. Some of the most brutal deaths ancient humans experienced came not from sudden attacks, but from drawn-out suffering that left its mark deep in the skeleton. One of the clearest examples comes from healed injuries that never fully healed. Across prehistoric sites, archaeologists have found human bones with fractures that show partial recovery, broken arms that fused incorrectly, crushed vertebrae that healed just enough to allow survival, but not enough to restore movement. These injuries tell us the person lived on, sometimes for years after the trauma. But the bones also show what that survival cost. Malformed joints indicate chronic pain. Bone thinning suggests long periods of immobility. Infections left rough, pitted surfaces where bacteria ate away at living tissue. These individuals didn't return to normal life, they endured it. In one case, a skull shows a deep fracture caused by blunt force trauma. The bone around the injury healed, proving the person survived the blow. But the fracture line remained visible, and the surrounding bone shows signs of infection that likely spread into the brain. The person lived long enough for healing to begin, and then they died anyway. These cases reveal something unsettling. Violence didn't need to kill instantly to be fatal. It only needed to weaken someone in a world where weakness meant vulnerability. Predators noticed, resources became harder to reach, infection had no treatment, and the fossil record preserves the result. Some deaths, however, were so sudden that there was no time for healing, no chance for escape, and no opportunity to react. One of the most chilling examples of this comes from a site high in the Himalayas. Near a remote glacial lake, hundreds of human skeletons were discovered scattered across the shoreline and submerged beneath the water. For decades, researchers debated what had happened. The remains belonged to men, women, and children. They weren't buried, they weren't arranged, they lay where they fell. When the bones were examined, a pattern emerged. Many skulls showed circular fractures on the top of the head. The injuries were consistent across individuals. Blunt force trauma delivered from above. There were no defensive wounds, no weapon marks, no signs of close-range fighting. The leading explanation is a massive hailstorm, not ordinary hail. Ice stones large enough to fracture skulls, falling fast enough to kill. Trapped at high altitude with nowhere to run, the group would have been struck repeatedly until they collapsed. Some skulls show single fatal blows, others show multiple impacts. The bones confirm that death came from the sky, and it wasn't a single event. Carbon dating revealed that different groups died at the lake centuries apart. The same place, the same cause, different people.
The environment didn't care who they were. And then there are deaths caused by fire. Volcanic eruptions have killed humans throughout history, but fossilized remains show just how absolute those deaths could be. In some cases, ancient humans were caught in pyroclastic flows, fast-moving clouds of superheated gas and ash. These flows don't burn slowly, they overwhelm. Victims suffocate almost instantly as lungs fill with ash and extreme heat destroys internal organs. In some skeletal remains, there are no signs of struggle at all. No fractures, no defensive injuries. The people simply stopped moving. In other cases, bones show thermal damage, cracking caused by extreme heat, teeth fractured by rapid temperature changes. These individuals didn't flee, they didn't fight, they were erased where they stood. One of the most sobering truths revealed by these fossils is how often death came without warning. Ancient humans didn't always have time to respond. Disasters didn't announce themselves. Predators didn't hesitate. Violence didn't pause. And sometimes death came from something as simple as hunger. During prolonged droughts, skeletal remains show clear signs of malnutrition, thin bones, growth interruptions in teeth, weakness recorded in the skeleton itself. In some sites, human bones are found near the last remaining water sources. The clustering suggests people stayed as long as they could, hoping conditions would improve. They didn't. These individuals didn't die violently. They starved, they dehydrated, they weakened until they collapsed. And in a world without aid, collapse was final. What ties all of these deaths together is not just brutality, but exposure. Ancient humans lived without buffers, no medicine, no infrastructure, no safety net. Every injury mattered. Every mistake carried weight. Every disaster was absolute. The fossil record doesn't exaggerate this reality, it documents it. And when we look at these bones, we're not just seeing death, we're seeing the limits of endurance, the point where survival finally failed. Toward the end of prehistory, humans became more numerous, more organized, and more capable. But that didn't make them safer. In many ways, it only introduced new ways to die. As tools improved, violence became more efficient. Archaeological sites from the later Stone Age show an increase in lethal injuries caused by weapons. Stone points embedded in ribs, arrowheads lodged in spines, skull fractures consistent with repeated blows rather than accidents. These weren't random encounters with animals or disasters. They were conflicts between people. One skeleton shows a stone blade driven directly between the ribs, piercing the lung. There's no sign of healing. Death would have been quick, but not instant. The individual likely suffocated as the lung collapsed and blood filled the chest cavity. Another skull bears multiple impact fractures on the side and back of the head. The blows came from behind. The spacing suggests repeated strikes, not a single fatal hit. This wasn't self-defense, it was execution. Some sites reveal mass graves containing dozens of individuals, all killed around the same time. Men, women, and children buried together without ceremony. Many skulls show similar injuries, suggesting coordinated attacks rather than isolated violence. These were not accidents, they were events. And while weapons made killing more effective, they didn't eliminate suffering. Many skeletons show evidence of survival after violence: healed arrow wounds, fused fractures, bones remodeled after trauma. These people lived on, carrying injuries that would have limited movement, strength, and endurance. In a prehistoric world, that kind of damage was often a death sentence delayed. An injured leg meant you couldn't hunt or flee. A damaged arm meant you couldn't defend yourself. An infected wound meant slow deterioration. The fossil record shows individuals who survived violence only to die later from the consequences. And then there are deaths that leave no marks at all. Some ancient human remains show no signs of trauma, disease, or injury, yet they are found in places that suggest sudden death, buried in ash, trapped in caves, preserved in sediments laid down rapidly. These individuals didn't fight, they didn't flee, they were simply caught. What all of these deaths share is not just brutality, but inevitability. Ancient humans lived at the mercy of forces they couldn't predict or control. Predators, climate, geology, and other humans all posed constant threats. There was no safe period, no stable equilibrium. Survival was temporary, and that is what the fossils prove. They don't show us legends or triumphs, they show us pressure, impact, and collapse. They show us how thin the margin between life and death really was. The ancient humans whose bones we study today were not defined by how they died, but their deaths defined what their world was like. A world where strength helped but didn't guarantee survival. A world where intelligence mattered but didn't prevent disaster. A world where one moment could erase everything. Most ancient humans died and left nothing behind. No trace, no story. But these individuals did. Their bones endured. And in doing so, they recorded the most brutal truth of all, that being human has always meant being vulnerable.